to show you how easy it is to add clips to your layout and have it look lifelike. There are a couple of things we can do, and I'm going to use both these clips on this layout that I've put together. So let's go ahead and just jump right in and get started. We're going to start with the paperclip. I have the paperclip layer activated right here. So we are going to attach it actually over here on the side of this so that it looks like it's clipping this little tag and paper together. So we're going to start by turning it the way that we want it. And one thing that's very helpful in doing this is you want to zoom in so that you're just dealing with what you're working with right here. Okay, so now we're going to place it, we're just going to kind of put it right here in between. And I want it to look like, okay, there we go. Now, let's think for a moment, if this were a real clip and it were holding these papers together, we wouldn't see all of the clip, correct? We would have either this part here be on the outside and this would be underneath the papers, or vice versa. So we're going to come over and we're going to get our lasso tool, but we're going to work with the Polygonal lasso tool. And I'm going to take apart this outer edge just with what we see on the paper here. So from this edge, because that other part would be sticking out, and we're just going to kind of draw around it. And just have to get as close as we can right through here. And then right here on this edge. And then we're just going to come around and connect them. Now when we click delete and select deselect, now you can see that it looks like that under part is over here. Now, a couple of things we can do to make it a little more realistic. Again, let's zoom in, and we're at 200%, so this is a lot more pixelated than it would be at 100%. But we're going to get our eraser tool, and we're just going to do it really small here. And see this little bit here that we missed? We're just going to kind of clean that up a little with our eraser tool. Whoops. And of course we can do our edit step backwards if we do too much. Now, same with over here. I'm just gonna, just so that it kind of blends. Now I have my opacity at 59, so I'm gonna take that back up to 100. There we go. Okay, now when we zoom out, it looks like it's really clipped there. But the next thing we want to do is apply a shadow. So we're going to double click on our paperclip layer so that we can pull up our layer style. Now we're not going to need a really dramatic shadow here, because it's going to be, if it was in real life, it's going to be pretty close to the paper. So we're going to click drop shadow, and then we're going to double click on the drop shadow so that we can get to this menu in here. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change this color from black to this blue that's underneath here. Okay, and then I'm actually going to just make it a little darker than that, but so it's in that, and a little grayer, so it's in that color family. Whoops. Now, so we do want a little more distance, so maybe we'll up this up to about 8. Whoops, no, not 87. So let's take it back down to maybe 6. And the spread by about 2. And the size, no, I think 5 is probably good. Okay, So now let's zoom in on this and let's just get it to 100%. Okay, so as you can see, we've got a little bit of a shadow there, but it's less shadow than necessarily what our papers are underneath. And it looks like we've got a clip there. Now, if we wanted to still take a little bit off on here so it looks a little more blended, once we get that shadow on there, we can. And that's it. Now, one other way that we can do this is I'm going to take off the shadow and I'm going to duplicate this layer. So our top layer is the paper clip here, and I'm going to hide that so we know that we have that copy there. And this bottom one, which is the paper clip there, I'm going to do image adjustment, hue saturation to pull up this menu. We're going to desaturate it and change the darkness just a little. And then we're going to move it down one and over. So now, again, you can move it around a little more. And you can make it darker by going back to that hue saturation. And that's, of course, way darker than we'd want, but by having it dark and then changing the opacity, then what you can do with that is now you can move the shadow however you want. And the nice thing about doing it this way is it just gives kind of a cleaner look to these edges because you're not technically shadowing, you're not applying a shadow to this top one. So, and you can mess with that opacity and make it, you know, however dark or light, and you can move it in. So now as we go back, you can see the shadow there, but it's not super dramatic. So those are two ways that you can create a shadow with a clip and clip it so that it looks like it's been paper clipped. So now let's take this yellow clip and let's add it here so it looks like it's holding these together. Now it's kind of big in proportion to the rest of my picture. I don't think I'd really buy a clip that big. So now we're going to zoom in up to here. And here it looks like it's just laying on top. And if we were to apply a shadow to that, it would look really unrealistic, right? So what we want to do is we want to make it look like part of this is behind and these papers are coming through here. So the best way to do that, I'll take off any shadow there. What I am going to do though is I'm going to make my copy now. And I'm going to hide the bottom layer because that's going to end up being our shadow, but this top one is where we're going to make the changes to it. So we're going to zoom way in. Now we want it to look like this background paper here is coming through, is on top of this part. So again, we get our little lasso and we're just going to draw along the edges here. And because the layer we have highlighted is this top clip one, when we delete it, that's what it takes away. So now it looks like, and we'll get this our little eraser out, it looks like that paper is underneath or is coming through there. Okay, now we can also see that there's a little bit on here that we want to get rid of. So we're just gonna take that off so that it looks like it's just our top layer. and again over here. And we can use the lasso, I think the lasso one will work just a bit better. It keeps it straighter lines. And just use the eraser for little pieces. And again, this part of the clip right here. Okay, now we have the double clip down here. So now we're getting a little more tricky. I'm going to take the bottom one off. I'm just going to try to follow down the clip. And every so often come over and delete. Now, not that anyone is even going to realize that that was there, but by having it not show up and just having it be a single one, it looks a lot more realistic than when you have the double. So I would be a little more careful than I'm being, because I'm just kind of wanting to hurry through and give the general idea on these curves. And then on this, it's going to be the inside one that we're taking off, because of the way that it shows it. Okay, so I'm not gonna, well, I guess I'm this close. This is kind of sloppy, but I want to give you the basic idea. And again, no matter what clip you're working with, the idea is to just think what would be hidden and what would not show up if this were really clipped to a paper. Okay, so now if we scroll out, it looks like we just have the one metal clip here. So now when we add a very slight drop shadow, which we'll do at about, again, we can change the color to something in the photo or even in this brown. Opacity about 68%, distance 6. Oops. See, obviously 60, that's really dramatic, but just to show that's what the distance is. So you can up it a little depending on how much distance you want. Size, I think 10 is a good size there. We don't really need to worry, maybe do a 2 with spread. Okay, now when we zoom out, it looks like, we just have enough of a shadow. Again, we don't want a super dramatic shadow. We don't want it to look like it's floating on top, but we do want to give a little bit of a shadow. Now we had put the clip underneath with that one. So let's zoom back in here. We had saved that there. So if we now activate it, but we change it to desaturate and darken. So there it kind of fills in, and then we just change the opacity. I'll only take the drop shadow off of this top one. Okay. Now change the opacity. And it's pretty dramatic. It probably would look better instead of, I'm going to go ahead and delete this. And this top one, let's make that. So after we have done the changes, then copy it and duplicate it and take that bottom layer and desaturate it. And we're not seeing it because it's directly underneath there. But now we can, however much we want to add that on there, and then change the opacity and soften it. So just kind of with whatever look it is you want to go for. I kind of like the shadow that we had on this before. where it was, but those are the two different ways that you can create the shadow. But where we had the multiplied in around 68% opacity, and this we had about 6. This one was 10, 2. Okay, there you go. So again, this is a little rough right through here, so take the time to make it a little more crisp when you're cutting those edges off. But from a distance, our layout now looks like it is clipped and paper clipped there and has a much more realistic look to it. I hope this was helpful, and I would love to see what things you're able to do with this.